Yeah, cool. So questioning beliefs, having new ideas presented to you, how do you deal with the shock factor in that? Because I know for a lot of people who start to have these experiences with doubt, or even just to realize how many questions they actually have about their faith and their beliefs, it can be pretty scary. It can be pretty unexpected, And so how do you wrestle through the tension and the frustration that can come when you're going through those seasons of doubt?
Yeah. So for me, I think I like the word shock factor, and that's something I've mentioned to you some. Is I think part of it is that for the most part, at least in the Bible Belt in the South, let's just refer to the southeastern portion from Texas over to North Carolina and up to Tennessee, up into North Carolina. This area is evangelical hotbed, which is not a necessarily a negative thing. It just is what it is. And in the context of that, at least or any very fundamental context, and I use these words not in a negative way. It is just what they are. In those contexts, what a lot of times happens is people are in boxes. They're in like safety nets, or at least they grow up in these boxes and safety nets of their faith and their religion, specifically Christian evangelicalism in America. And what often happens is that people grow up in this tradition of belief, and they don't have a lot of opportunity to question it. And when they leave that safety net and they go somewhere, maybe, and this is why you see, I feel like a lot of college students, when they go to college and they get, the old kind of Christian thing is you got to be ready to keep your faith in college, protect your faith in college. And that was a thing I was told growing up. But part of the reason I think that that's such a phenomenon is because people go off to college or they go out and they're no longer tied down by, like, I guess what tradition is or what everyone else is doing. They can actually question things, or they're exposed to some beliefs or systems of belief or questions that they really never thought about. And when they do, they haven't been presented with good answers, or the answers that they've been given just like they just don't make sense or they don't work. And so there's this shock factor, and it creates a tension for a lot of people. And a lot of people will abandon the faith or just kind of really become nominal Christians, or they'll have a very, very negative outlook on and towards Christianity. And didn't have an experience where I just felt like I wanted to abandon my faith, but I did have the experience, working in my undergrad degree. I went to Shorter University and I started to, I took a class. I took First and Second Kings was a book study class. And the professor that I had really challenged us in the class with different questions. And he would do it in a way like kind of messing with us. And I remember I would go to his office and I would be like, I don't really know what to do with these questions. Like, are you saying that the Bible isn't true or anything like that? And he would never give me a direct answer, because what I noticed, what he wanted us to do was to process through what we believed, not what we were taught in church or what we learned in Sunday school, or even what we were pressured to believe. And so, there's that tension was created. And I think for a lot of people, there's like this shock of like, I don't know how to respond to this. I don't know how to do with this. And for me, part of it, I don't know if this is a reason. I mean, I work in church, so I have a job at a church. So part of that is like, I mean, I'm kind of paid to like be working on my spiritual life in a way. So for some people that are working like a 9 to 5 job, that is not that a lot of people, they don't have a reason to stay because they didn't actually believe in it in the first place. They just kind of were a part of a tradition, which
Right.
is the case for a lot of people. And so I think that's that shock factor that you kind of mentioned, and that it does create a tension of like, what do I do with these questions and these doubts? And so that is another part of the reason that I think the podcast can be helpful, or podcast platforms or books or anything that you can use to help you. I think those are all necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like I grew up in just a bubble, just the Christian evangelical bubble. I was homeschooled too, and I'm thankful for that experience for sure. But I remember going to college and just having this realization that I had never really been around people that didn't think like I did or grew up in the tradition that I did. And I kind of had this idea that everyone else had the same kind of world that I did, And so going through college was a really interesting time for me too, because I was presented with these questions I didn't know I had. I was brought out, the bubble was burst, things that I thought I knew, I realized I didn't. My whole worldview, came crashing down. And that, yeah. So I know that can be a really scary, dark place to walk through.
Yeah. And it was just one of those things where like, I got frustrated. Honestly, I would get really frustrated thinking back at my time in church, because I was like, why did none of the pastors that I knew talk about any of this stuff, or like
Yeah.
these like question marks on certain passages of scripture and things like that. The big thing was just like the questions I had was on inerrancy and things like that. And I struggled with a lot of that. And so, and then later on it developed into just like observations of the church as a whole. And like, we're mentioning these things as not like a negative bashing of bubbles or tradition. Like, I think it's healthy to have like some form of tradition in your faith. But I think the thing for a lot of people is they didn't really know what it was they believed. They just believed what everyone else did. So.
Yeah.